Hello, everyone. Welcome to Complexity Weekend. Welcome to our December 2020 event. We're really excited about this heartbeat, and we are really looking forward to interacting with you all live and in replay. So for the next 25 minutes, we're going to feature a musical performance by Michael Garfield, one of our great facilitators. And at 9 a.m. PST in 25 minutes, we're going to meet you right back here for a 1 hour and 20-minute live stream featuring some of our facilitators and an interactive Jamboard. And the rest of the event will be in the interactive gather space. All right, everyone, here's some music, some cybernetic music from Michael Garfield. Check it out, and we will see you in 25 minutes. Thanks, and bye. All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for coming out to Complexity Weekend. It is December 19th, 2020, and this is our Heartbeat event. So we're going to have a really exciting day, a lot of interactive sessions and fun complexity education today. I'm Daniel. I'm one of the co-organizers, and I'm here with my co-organizers who are...
Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm helping out with this Heartbeat event. Nice to be on the live stream.
Nice. I'm Sean. Nice to see everyone again. I'll see you in the gather space.
Cool. I'm going to share my slides so that the participants see the same thing as the live stream, and let us just get started. So hello and welcome, everyone. This is the Complexity Weekend Community of Practice, and today we are going to be talking a little bit in the beginning about Complexity Weekend, and then the second part of the organizer live stream will have to do with just what we're going to get done today. If you're a first-time visitor or perhaps an old hand, welcome to Complexity Weekend. Let's talk a little bit about, first, the initial conditions of Complexity Weekend, since initial conditions are so important for complex systems. We started with an in-person hackathon in 2019 in San Francisco. And then while planning for our early 2020 hackathon, we decided to go online for reasons that people may be able to guess and indicated here with a little icon. And we had a really great 2020 with 2 online hackathons in May and October, as well as a bunch of Heartbeat events, the type of which you're at right now. And we've been experimenting and improving since then. These weekend hackathons are very team and project oriented. We're trying to form these emergent, diverse teams to deal with problems from a complexity science perspective. And then the heartbeats are about revisiting those perspectives and re-enlivening, re-inspiring our teams, and also keeping it very open to all different community roles. Speaking of community roles, our community has a lot of awesome participants, and there's so many different roles that people can move between and be one role at one point and be another role another point. The biggest circle is our community itself. That's the green circle. And within the green circle, we have roles including the organizers, which are those who are on the live stream at this moment, the facilitators, some of whom we'll introduce to you in just a few minutes, associates and supporters who help us in various ways, and then importantly, the two big doorways into the community are the twice annual weekend hackathons. That is the May and October hackathons from 2020, and we'll be talking more about that upcoming. And then the big heartbeat is for the monthly heartbeats. So to everyone who's here right now and to everybody who's going to watch it in replay, whatever your situation is, we're just really happy that you have come to our monthly heartbeat and decided to get involved. And hopefully, as we can convey, there's fluidity with these roles, and it's something where we hope that different people will be able to find the kind of contribution that resonates with them. Another key topic in complex systems is multiple representations. So this is sort of a static role-based representation of our community, and we can now look at a dynamic, not role-based representation. So this is a timeline on the x-axis, taking us from our previous hackathon online, October 2020, through to our upcoming hackathon in May 2021 and beyond. And on the y-axis is kind of like the energy levels. And the green line is our community energy level. And so we have these awesome get-togethers, jubilees twice a year, and then smaller peaks. Those are the heartbeats. And that with the red arrow is right where we're at right now in December 2020. Then in the background, in the backdrop, in the foreground, whatever it is for you, there's your team, because Complexity Weekend really wants to emphasize the power of the edge, the relationship, the small team, and that's where so much of our learning by doing happens, is in the team context, in the relational context. So the community of practice is here for you, and we're going to be putting up these 2 annual hackathons and 10 heartbeats per year. And then everything else is you filling in the flesh and really enlivening the body that is the community. And we'll again return to this pretty soon. What about who we are as this body? We are a global community of practice. This is some of the registration data from our October 2020 cohort hackathon. And we had over 35 countries represented from 100 participants. Didn't take country registration information for this December heartbeat, but similarly, we see people coming from all across the world. And there's just so many points to say on this, from how it bears on us organizing our events from a time zone perspective to what it means for participation and inclusion across the world. Sean or Sarah, any thoughts you would want to add on this though?
Sarah, what was your experience in October with this global kind of community?
Yeah, I was going to say my first Complexity Weekend event was the October 2020 hackathon, and it really was so cool to interact with so many different people, especially the fact we can do it virtually and just open it up to that many people, even with the different time zones. It was really cool. I got to meet so many people from so many places. So I think it's really exciting.
Yeah, one thing I just want to kind of chime in with is, we're forming very diverse teams to help tackle some of these really difficult problems. And having such a global participation is really a boon to the diversity you can end up forming with teams of people that you meet in these heartbeats or at these biannual hackathons. So you can get people in your team from Brazil, Russia, India, and you're all going to have very different perspectives out the gate on a particular problem, not even taking into account people's different backgrounds or perspectives or trainings or whatnot as another layer of diversity. So this is a critical kind of component to our community practice.
Thanks both. Also drawing from the October 2020 registration information, here is some of the skills and ideas and perspectives that people bring to bear while they're studying and solving complex problems. And this runs the gamut from the qualitative to the quantitative, and everyone with a recognition of the lifelong complexity journey behind us, currently facing us, ahead of us. And it's, again, bringing together across these different skills and approaches that makes the community so powerful. And just to give another representation on that is we asked people, what is your background or level of familiarity with complexity science? And consistently, between a third and up to a half of our participants are totally new to complexity curious, as we say, and or their first complexity weekend event. So especially to newcomers to our community and to complexity, we want to extend a welcome, and we hope that you'll find complexity is a nexus where you find a lot of ideas coming together, a lot of people, a lot of projects. And we also see represented the academic perspective as well as student, science, government, health, just all these different sectors. And it's in the interfaces between them where we're going to be having some of our most important projects. Speaking of coming together on important topics and questions, I will hand it over to Sarah and just say, advance when you want me to change the slide, but go ahead and take it away.
Sounds great. Thanks, Dan. So I am going to cover what brings us all together. And this is super relevant because I am a beginner. My first event, like I said, was in October. It was really cool. Again, I'm super new to complexity, but just kind of diving into the community and speaking to so many people with different backgrounds is such a core piece. So the first bullet there, shared purpose and interest in complexity science. Just knowing that everybody's there to talk about and understand the same thing makes it really easy to be a beginner in this space, because I think it can be intimidating to learn something new. But I immediately felt welcome. So that, I think, brings us all together, is just the interest and wanting to learn more. So with that said, the desire to have impact on co-creative teams and improve our community through feedback and participation. So I also got involved with a really cool team who we actually have a poster up, the Dentry Damon team, which hopefully you guys can check out, around knowledge management systems. I didn't know what I was doing when I joined the team. I was just like, let's go for it. But yeah, that's the goal, is that we really want to see if we can form and come together around ideas we're interested in. And then the core values and following community guidelines as well are all a part of that. So if you can advance to the next slide, please, we'll go into that. So the collective purpose, we learn complexity science by doing, which is what these events are for. Again, just speaking to each other, diving in, helping to organize a Heartbeat event. It's really fun to be able to be in a community of practice. We serve through deep time. So again, being a beginner, especially to complexity science, it's not necessarily easy. And so that kind of long-term goal and thinking is that we're not going to get it right away. And as we all continue to learn together, that's really valuable. So kind of having a longer-term view of this new area really helps. And then we include to innovate. Diversity is key. So again, having a global community of practice is really amazing. And we all have different life experiences to begin with. But then on top of that, everybody's different areas of expertise, or whether you're a beginner or not, including more and more perspectives will only help us to further innovate. I don't know if Dan or Sean, you want to hop in at any point, feel free.
I actually have something to say, and so something you'll notice in the slides that Sarah's going to cover next is this at the top bullet is basically always complexity oriented, and that's really first and foremost in the way a lot of the organizers think too. Complexity Weekend, the community of practice, is a complex system, and we're constantly learning how to evolve and kind of adapt as the community's needs evolve. But just basically, how can we take our understanding of these systems with thought of interconnecting components at the micro level and emergent behavior, and feed that knowledge that we gain studying various systems of different disciplines back in on the way our community operates. So even something like this slide, our collective purpose is a big, important feedback mechanism from the top down, so that the agents kind of know what to do in the space or how to orient themselves. But at the same time, is this purpose aligning with you, or is there maybe some feedback that we could get as organizers to to enhance this deck and make the purpose even more compelling to you. That's all feedback we'd really love to hear from you. Dan?
That's perfect. Keep going for it, Sarah.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say the same thing. The more feedback on how we can all learn from each other, what your experience is like, share that as much as you can, because that's what's just going to help us, better hone in on our purpose and make sure we're all feeling we're aligned with that. So if you want to hop to the next slide, our core values, Complexity Weekend is itself a complex system, what Sean just said. We are learning by doing, by having these events. So we'll all learn from each other and make these events even better just by doing that. Education is active, so learn complexity science by doing. That's what we're doing. Teamwork makes the dream work. So true. We form teams during the hackathons and even continually during Heartbeats. If you're interested in a team, reach out, but it really is all about working together and making sure we can all learn to hear each other and hear different perspectives. Participation means accessibility and inclusion for all. So same kind of thing. Respect is key, definitely always. And step up and be brave. If you want to help out, that's what I did. If you are confused about something and you don't know because you're a beginner, ask the question. It's so valuable when you're a beginner. You're never going to be a beginner again. So I've been embracing that, not knowing. Everything's new, like you don't know what your question will bring up for someone who may have already been in the space. Just put it out there. It'll definitely be worth it. I don't know if you or Dan or Sean, you want to say anything on this slide? Or we can move forward.
Dan, you want to mention something?
Nope.
Cool.
I have one thing to mention. It's just that accessibility, inclusion, respect, these are the kinds of behaviors that we can really embody with these core values that enable this diversity that's so unique to this community, that allows us to create the form of innovation that we're so good at in this community. So it's really important that you're always inclusive to people, you're respectful. That could take the form of making sure your language, has as minimal jargon as possible, or that, you're respecting that people, for some people, English may not be their primary language. So you just have to embrace those kind of communication barriers and get over them together so that you can really bring as many diverse people together as possible to work on these important problems.
Exactly. Cool. Next slide, please. Great. And our participation guidelines. So the team and individual is a complex system. So taking into account maybe someone's language isn't English, their first language isn't English, time zones are different, and just considering that like work-life balance and everyone communicating together is definitely going to help. We are all complex systems in ourselves, and when we come together, we are a complex system. So adopt a complexity thinking mindset. So just having that at the core while we're interacting, when we're doing things, how can you apply these complexity ideas to your life and what projects you're involved in. Communication is key, relations and teams. So again, speaking up, being clear, whether that's about, meetings or if you're confused about something, always communication is key. Good communication is key. Embracing the technology, but know its limits. So using good audio and visual etiquette when you can, muting your mic if you're not talking. Hopefully you can turn your video on so you can have that nonverbal communication too. We want people to fully participate so we can all really show up together. Even if you can only show up for a little bit of time, do that if you can, and then reach out on the edges and stay involved. So show up whenever you can. It's any participation matters. And hopefully I covered everything. Thank you guys.
Thanks, Sarah. And also awesome co-organizing. Great times indeed. Sean, take it away.
Sure. Yeah. If you don't mind advancing to the next slide, I'm just going to kind of cover what we are going to do today. So really today is 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Show up for as much as you can. If you have to drop out, can't attend the whole time, that's totally fine. But basically, next slide, please, is this is basically the organizers for this particular monthly Heartbeat. As you may have seen in the previous slide with all the different circles, there's several organizers in our community, and that actually enables us to do a lot more. And if organizing is actually something that may be interesting to you, definitely reach out. We have plenty of monthly heartbeats that need to be organized. We have 2 hackathons that are pretty large each year that need a lot of work. So definitely reach out. We're very grateful for Sarah for stepping up and helping out with this heartbeat. And we hope to see you here on the next slide for the next one. Next slide, please. So I also really want to mention our facilitators. Facilitators are kind of the lifeblood of this community. They bring so much in such a diverse set of ways in terms of the wisdom they bring, the experience, the advice that they give teams, being in the teams themselves a lot of the times. And we have 4 really great facilitators for today: Sasha, Scott, Jen, Steven. You're going to meet them all throughout the event, and some in casual settings, just kind of running into each other, co-working, or maybe during one of their facilitated sessions. Check the program, which I'll mention in a minute, to really see exactly when to interact with them, where, and what URLs to go to. But they are really driving this event as far as what they're bringing to the table, the experiences that we're all going to share together. Next slide, please, Dan. I really want to talk for a moment about Gather, though. For a lot of people watching this, Gather is going to be probably a new platform. It's gather.town if you just want to go to the website and kind of look at their splash and kind of get a flavor for what it is. But it's a really exciting tool that's kind of emerged from this pandemic, where you're a little avatar. You see Sarah's little avatar in the picture. You move around in this space, and depending on where you are with respect to other people, you join a dynamic video call. So if you're actually within earshot of somebody, your video will appear, and we'd encourage you to turn on your video and turn on your mic, and you have that good video etiquette. But you'll talk to anyone you kind of go nearby, and there's private spaces you can enter where you'll be able to work with your team, and people who aren't on the rug with you or near the table can't hear. And there's these kind of dynamic boundaries that you'll learn about. So I'd encourage you to go into that space as soon as possible. It's in the program, which I'll mention in a second. But go into that Gather space and really experiment around. Yeah, great. This is the whole space for our monthly heartbeats. We have one Gather space where you're going to be these little avatars moving around, doing sessions or whatnot. And this is the same space every month for every heartbeat. And there's lots of different elements. If you go to the information booth in the upper right, you see info booth. That has the program for the event today linked right inside. So you can just open it and look and Gather. Or there's also a poster right there, which actually has this directory image. So if you're ever lost or confused, go to the information booth. There's probably even going to be people there who are willing to help you and kind of point you around. But just some of the key highlights: toward the top, live session room. In the program, when you see there's a live facilitation session, go up to the top through that door. You'll enter another room and engage in that experience. You'll spawn right below that when you first enter. Or if you ever get confused, you can refresh or respawn. There you go, nice. There's all these fun little rooms you'll find: the bar, the game room. There's a holiday party room that got added by Shirley, which is really cool. In the center, there's lightning talks, which we'll have a little bit of in the program. And then one of the most important aspects are these little rugs with tables and whiteboards. And these are the team co-working spaces. So some of them are already designated to teams that are registered for this particular heartbeat. Some are open. Feel free to start a team today if you want, or just sit there and co-work and meet people. But the poster sessions are going to be focused around these team co-working spaces. And we're going to have even a 2-hour just unstructured co-working time. So we're really encouraging people to explore this space and do teamwork together. And yeah, just enjoy it. It's the same space every month. As I kind of mentioned, etiquette's important, and then the space itself will always be around. So we encourage you even have your team meetings in this Gather space. Be collidable, let people kind of run into you randomly and have that serendipity. Last note, I think next slide, Dan, is just the program I've mentioned a few times already. There's the link at the bottom, the bit.ly link. It's also emailed out to everyone who RSVP'd. This is your single source of truth. So every event going on, the description, where it's at, which facilitator is going to be where, and at what time, that's all in this one document. And as you may have noticed, if you've ever attended other Complexity Weekend events, there's always a program. So there's always a single source of truth. If you're ever confused, get access to this document or ask around, and this will have all the information you need. Dan, why don't you close out the last slide, and we'll go ahead and move on to the facilitators.
Yep, it looks good. Thanks for sharing, Sean. So we're about 9:20 a.m. PST. We're about to go to the facilitators. We will welcome them in. And just in closing, if you want to support Complexity Weekend, you can do so at this PayPal link above. It helps us pay for our Gather bandwidth and some other costs. And we're a lean community and a participatory one. So anything you can think of in terms of financial or non-financial contributions are welcome. And here we have, as per the schedule, our first on-stream facilitator. Welcome Dr. Jen Huff. How are you doing today? And I'm going to unshare my screen and we'll just continue the rest of this in a more like four-person conversation. But hi, Jen.
Hi, how you guys doing? I haven't seen you guys for a bit.
It's been a minute.
Everybody's staying safe and healthy. It feels like a DJ early morning, like the drive time DJ. Got my coffee.
Oh, yes.
I don't know what we're going to do when this pandemic kind of dies down. It's all we know. It's all we're used to. So what is it going to be like when we can...
Yeah, I know. I missed the in-person hackathon, but this is the second hackathon and subsequent Heartbeat. So this is literally all I know. This is my environment.
Thanks for coming on, Jen. Always great to hear from you. So maybe just as a starting point for our conversation, because we know that you're going to have an interactive session later on, and that's indicated in the program. Just where's a foothold? Where's a doorway? Where's complexity happening right now, or what are you seeing in that type of area right now?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on with complexity right now. There's, of course, the whole pandemic and also economic meltdown that I think, it's interesting because I watch the news and, there's reporting on increasing unemployment figures and, will Congress get this stimulus package passed? But I guess for a little bit of context, I remember I was in actually East Timor or Timor-Leste in 2008. And so this is a tiny little country kind of wedged between Indonesia and Australia, and they use the American dollar. And so I was there in East Timor doing pilot research for a research project. And during the summer, watching the economic situation around the world melt down and I'm watching it mostly on BBC World News and talking to a lot of NGO and World Bank people, and like everybody's just trying to wrap their head around what's going on. And in this moment, I think that we're not really even there yet, because we're still trying to wrap our heads around what's going on with the pandemic, even though we've been doing this for 9-10 months now. So it's like I've definitely been like trying to pay attention to like some economics. So I think like where complexity is there is we've had in America a government that's treated the pandemic versus the economic situation as an either or situation, and it's really not. It's not like a trade-off, and there was of course, all of the early models were problematic because they were built on some assumptions that were perhaps not that strong. And also just we get better with modeling as we do more of it iteratively as a process. But there was this really great, really powerful model early on that was just like, look, public health, it creates a limit for where our economic situation is. And the more distance you lose on public health, you're creating a lower and lower limit in terms of economics. And even if the numbers are off, that particular insight, I think, is really key. And I think it's one that's really been lost, is how these systems are not separable, is that they are completely integrated, which is, if you think about it, if you have a sick workforce, they can't work, right? So it harms everyone. So I think that there's a lot of so that's just one big thing that's going on right now. I think another kind of slightly smaller, but it's been an ongoing theme, particularly through this administration, going back to Cambridge Analytica, is complexity in data science, ethics, AI, and machine learning. And there's been a situation with Timnit Gebru, who was fired at Google, or kind of resigned, was resigned by Google just a little bit ago. If anybody's not paying attention to that, I really recommend. VentureBeat's got some really good explainers on the whole situation that link out to some other, they kind of give you the whole, a better kind of a handle on the whole AI ethics ecosystem. And I think that, I've been surprised the vaccine is out. Like 9 months ago, I was just like, it's going to take 12 months to make a vaccine, and that we're in it under 8. I know a lot of the background work is been done by some of our, kind of extended network of colleagues who are in the that sort of field. It's been amazing. I mean, the legwork's been getting done for a decade, and to see it come together so quickly, I probably need to eat a hat or something because I was swearing it wasn't going to be possible. But it is going to be another 6 months before it's widely distributed in America. But we're connected to the rest of the world, and so both economically and just people moving around. So, even if we get vaccines out to everybody in America, everything doesn't go back to normal because we buy stuff and sell stuff to the rest of the world, even if we're still not going to be traveling for tourism and so forth. So it's a long haul. And I think there's, so those are kind of like the big complexity things in the world that I'm thinking about right now, is this AI and ethics situation, and machine learning and transparency. And I think like that interacts with regular people, just watching friends of mine on whatever social media platform complaining about trying to look for a job, which a lot of people are, and feeling like they're getting sent to the bottom of the stack by a robot, which is kind of this black box way people are thinking about machine learning and AI, but then also seeing friends who are recruiters not understanding how machine learning is interacting with the rankings in their applicant tracking systems. So I think that, we live in this data economy right now. And so how our data is working out, who are all the stakeholders, which are not necessarily obvious, kind of who are these more distributed stakeholders to outcomes of machine learning and AI. So those are the themes that I'm thinking about definitely right now, is the kind of obvious immediate pandemic and economic crisis, but also kind of, we live in this new milieu of data, and kind of what are those tools that we're using doing.
Thanks for that, Jen. Our resident data scientist, Sean, raised your hand. What do you think about that?
I mean, there's so much to unpack there that I think the thing the pandemic has really shown me is just how interconnected all these different systems are, and how fragile a lot of them were, and how one fragile system can kind of fall and then kind of take others with it. And I think what I've heard a lot throughout this whole pandemic is this idea of like a new normal, and as much as the real world is equilibrium to any degree, like what is this kind of somewhat new equilibrium point we might move to post-pandemic? And for me, as like a remote worker, I was a remote worker actually before the pandemic. I'm super curious, just from your perspective, Jen, on like kind of deep time humanity and like archaeology and that type of stuff. Like, what do you see as kind of like the new normal of work in terms of how much will be remote, how will offices be, real estate?
So, I'm an archaeologist, so I spend a lot of time thinking about what the stuff that we make is, and kind of what the impacts on that are. So, kind of what the new normal is so there's a couple things that I've been thinking about with that. Is we have a bunch of people who have integrated being maskless into their social identity, which I think is it's a lot of different things, but it serves as a signal as who you want to cooperate with and who you consider a competitor. But these people who are, so we can also view this behavior as, I want to not wear a mask and keep my bar open, right? That's free riding on the public health. So, which is kind of antisocial. And we have a lot of competing ideas about, it used to be that society was the thing that separated humans from the animals, which is a problematic model, and that it was animals that were red in tooth and claw, and civilization and our great cognitive skills that separated us from nature this way. But now we really, I think the popular, at least in America, and I always I add that caveat a lot because I just really want to make sure that I don't think this is everybody's point of view or necessarily even all Americans, but that our popular narrative is that everybody is in a fight. Everybody's like out for themselves. I'm a selfish agent. However you want to frame it, and really our thing is, humans are very good at adapting to new situations, and we're very social. We're dependent on each other. And so what happens when you remove 1 to 2% of these people who are doing this really antisocial behavior, and what are the long-term cultural implications for that? And then as I'm an archaeologist, I think about what would be the stuff-making correlates of that. But just kind of on a bigger scale is not everybody can do remote work. It generally tends to be fairly privileged work, although, all of our contract tracers and call center employees, may not feel that that's especially too privileged. Those aren't always the best paying jobs, since privilege and good pay are kind of associated with each other, correlated with each other as a rule. But we have a whole economy based around supporting people in office buildings. So it's, people who repair shoes, people who sell flowers, people, I ripped my skirt, I need to go, or I just want some new office clothes. I'm going to stop by the Ann Taylor, in the downtown city core, and sandwiches, coffee, and so forth. And so if companies decide that they don't need to pay that expensive rent on that high prestige building downtown, and everybody's going to go remote, what happens? It's a lot of interconnected effects if people don't return to that office place. But I think there's a lot of potential, if people kind of spread out from the city cores for kind of new, smaller cores, and then we could see a real enrichment of our local communities as people don't get up, go through a tube where there's no connection, and then wind up in a different place. Is that we can kind of spend more time at our local coffee shops, using them as our remote offices. And so I think that there's some interesting implications to that, but it's definitely, I think, going to be very disruptive for a lot of the top-down, like Starbucks and or Subway or whatever, the big places, because it's much harder for them to scale to tiny. Starbucks clearly has scaled to tiny little outlets everywhere. But I think that there's an opportunity for kind of, it might feel a little bit like the suburbification of the world. It's like, we're all kind of in our little enclaves. And I think that there's an opportunity for real cultural variation to come out of that, which I always think is interesting. So
Thanks, Jen. Just while we're closing out, what would get people excited for your awesome session, and why is it so important to communicate complexity?
Yeah, communicating complexity is really hard. We might have all noticed. And I've been thinking about it because, I am out in the world. So, I'm kind of started out as a self-student for complexity science, and got interested in it when I was an undergrad. And I've been trying to explain these ideas to people who aren't, who don't know Santa Fe Institute or the kind of the other main cores. I think Europe has a lot more adoption of complexity science in their education than America does. And we live in this world that's clearly very complex, but I think we tend to think about things very atomistically and with as simplified models as possible. And I think we miss out on a lot of second order stakeholders and the complex effects. And so I think one of the key things about this event is that it is so welcoming to newcomers, and that we're the outreach out into talking to the world about complexity. And so I'm doing a workshop on elevator talks so that we can kind of work on how do we say something interesting? It doesn't have to be the whole thing, but that's relevant to our audience very quickly, in the time that you have in an elevator. Because I really think that we've got these big problems and big changes going on, and being able to communicate effectively about them is going to be critical. So
Thank you, Jen. Great to have you on Livestream, and I hope that everybody who's watching will be able to attend your session. So we'll see you later. Peace, Jen.
See you there. All right,
and
bye.
Welcome to our second of our 3 facilitators who will come on today. Welcome, Scott David. How are you doing today?
Hello. Very well. Thank you. It's great to be here. Loving it.
Well, Scott, we all, as organizers, have so much to ask and so much to learn, but where do you want to jump in for the next 13 minutes?
So one of the things that, so I've been to a couple of Complexity, Heartbeat, and one of the weekends. They're terrific. So folks who are new to this, it was new to me recently, and it's always new and delicious and inspiring. One of the things that we've been working on at our lab, I'm at the University of Washington Applied Physics Lab, and one of the things that we're working on is de-risking. And how do you de-risk? And complex systems are kind of interesting because the risk is kind of their charm. So if you de-risk, then maybe they won't be complex anymore. It won't be as much fun. So, and I mean that only partially humorously, because one of the approaches we take in our lab is we look for de-risking practices in history. So we look and say, okay, how has this been done before? Is there something like this we can look for? I've been a lawyer for 30 years, and lawyers look for precedent, and precedent sometimes is direct and sometimes not. So one of the things that happened recently is I started to hear about and learn about Friston and Markov blankets. And I've only read about 3 pages of one Friston article, but already I'm thinking, wow, this seems like it could be really terrific. And so what I wanted to do today is present some of the not even initial learnings. These are naive ruminations by someone who's just coming into Friston, and I want to have the people who are Friston folks, which I know there are a few. There's a few champing at the bit right here on the screen. Start to have an exchange. So I'm learning in real time here. But let me talk to you a little bit about where I'm coming at it from.
Well, Scott, wait, just one point there.
Yeah.
Let's savor and capture this moment, which is a beginner's mind.
Yeah.
And we all are learning about these vast areas and the work of Carl Friston and the work of so many other researchers. It's like this big ocean. We're dipping into the shore, and we're going to be supporting each other and just giving that yes and perspective as we all help each other learn. So continue.
Yep. Yeah, it's going to be half-assed questions for a vast ocean of issues. That's going to be the half-assed part I'll bring. So there's a guy, Chris Alexander, I learned about a year ago, an architect who started compiling patterns in architecture. So for instance, he came up with, I forget, it was 100 patterns or 300 patterns, something like that. And it's called a pattern language, Chris Alexander. It's very interesting stuff. So he said, for instance, okay, if you have a portico is something that negotiates between private and public space. And so in all kind of residential things, you're going to have this space of negotiation between public and private. So he looks for patterns of portico. Okay. So I was reading about that and I was thinking, wow, that reminds me of another article I read years ago where somebody was doing metagenomics on water, ocean water. And so they were sequencing nucleic acids from the ocean water without knowing what species are present. And what they did is they came up with the patterns, nucleic acid patterns in this case, for hundreds, thousands of species. But what they observed was those patterns also represented only dozens of metabolic pathways. So in the same way as Chris Alexander was generalizing patterns, those patterns generalize in those metabolic pathways. So for instance, if you're looking out a window right now, take a look, anything that's green, there's hundreds of species right now that are green. But if it's green, it has one metabolic pathway that's being described, photosynthesis. That's a pattern. It's interoperable across the plants in a sense, right? And so you can start to think, okay, what are the patterns? Well, I do risk patterns. That's what I do for a living. As a lawyer, we did risk patterns. All we ever did was risk. In fact, law and insurance, what they are is entropy engines. They wouldn't exist. They wouldn't be powered. They wouldn't create value, but for disorder. So what do you do in that? Well, in tax, we used to do things, swaps or instruments, financial instruments. We did a series of transactions called boss transactions. And then there was a son of boss. And there are trends that go through all corporations and that are getting that kind of advice. They're kind of market things where they're introduced as innovations and then they get adopted because they work. But they're patterns. And so when I started looking at Friston, I thought, now, wait a second, these Markov blankets, now this is my initial impression. This is a total beginner's mind on it. We probably only have like a couple of minutes here, so I'll go really quick. So quick Markov blankets by a beginner. This is going to be hilarious for you guys because I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. So it seems like what the Markov blankets are, it seems like systems set up a self-lubricating barrier, and the lubrication is statistical. And so the edge of the system is the edge of, you take a metric and you say, let's use a bell curve, sort of. When it starts falling off in terms of that metric, you're getting towards the edge of that system and maybe beyond the edge. And oh, by the way, that system is banging into a bunch of other systems out there in the world, each of which has their own Markov blankets, each of which is generating, in a sense, expression by the statistical metrics that they propose or present, and consuming the metrics from other systems simultaneously. So that first impression, what I realize is, wait a second, what lawyers do, if that's at all the case, what lawyers do and what all laws do in contracts and rules, what you're doing is you're tweaking the statistics. So you're saying, hey, when you encounter someone else who buys into this contract or this folkway or this norm or this ethical construction, you're reducing the statistical difference between you and it. So it renders your externality innocuous and de-risks for you. Okay, now Friston people, tell me if that's all valid, worthwhile, worth pursuing. What is that in the range?
It is very much in range or within the Markov blanket, maybe, as they would say, Scott. But let's give another perspective on that blanket and think about how it applies to us right now. So the blanket, it's literally like a person being under a blanket. There's inputs, maybe the room's lights, and then there's outputs, like them pushing. And so inputs, we call that perception, and then the output, we call that action. And just as you importantly defined, that interface is defined statistically. So sometimes it is exactly congruent with the boundaries of the system as you'd expect. Other times, those statistical boundaries are actually not what you'd expect. It could be some sort of nonlinear causation chain in the environment that generates a dependency between two types of things happening. And in that sense, the blanket is a statistical construct. So that's where the fabric blanket sort of fades away. But we can think about Markov blankets and the interface between participants in a community. And just in these last couple minutes here, it's like somebody is coming in to the Complexity Weekend Markov blanket. They have the program, they've got the email, they're on the gather guest list, and now their Markov blanket internally, with all of its seething, exciting thoughts about complexity, maybe you feel like you're a little oasis in your own sector or in your own working group. Well, now these Markov blankets can merge through what? Shared niche. Values, communication, language, narrative, all these things are so critical because that's what coordinates the docking and the interfacing and the high bandwidth communication amongst these blanketed states, so that at first it's just coordination between blanketed states at a similar level, but just as you brought up with de-risking, pretty soon it becomes actually a higher level entity that is de-risking in a almost downwardly causing way. So there's so much to actually go into there. In the what would be a few more thoughts on that, and also get people excited about your session.
So how much time do we have? None, or
2 minutes?
1 minute or 2 minutes? Perfect. So so what we've been doing at the lab, so that's wonderful news, because that allows us to do fractal de-risking, which is something that is crazy and wonderful. Okay, so I heard this expression the other day in one of the chats in the Complexity chat, and it was exponential technologies, and I never heard that phrasing before, and I got very excited because a lot of investment stuff now is people are saying, modern monetary theory is this idea of exponential increase, and you're never supposed to draw straight lines on log paper for stock markets, right? I mean, you don't have exponential growth in stock markets typically, but we're talking about a different notion of de-risking and different notions of value. The possibility of exponential growth is interesting in a bounded system. Okay, but where we're going with it is we can take risk, then characterize it, and this is what we're doing in the project. In fact, we've done it for data sharing and been involved with the United Nations in that, Gates Foundation, and a number of other organizations. We're doing it for contact tracing coming up, and also for AI, in coordination with the Department of Homeland Security, with a number of different NGOs, UN folks. Each of these things, we're looking at their technically feasible things to do. AI, contact tracing, data sharing, it's technically feasible. And what we're studying, and now the Markov blankets are a way of characterizing it, we're going to look at whether they're reasonable from what we call BOLTs, which is business, operating, legal, technical, and social perspectives. Now, each of the stakeholders has a Markov blankets, multiple, individually, as group identities, etc. They have expectations, statistical expectations in which they wrap themselves, right? And those expectations, if they're not met, that's either a violation of a spec or a violation of a law or a norm. So what we're doing is collecting those practices with an eye towards then cataloging them, the de-risking practices from the different blankets, Markov blankets in business, operating, et cetera, and then using that as a testing suite for technologies that are feasible to make sure that they're reasonable to the stakeholders from those perspectives of business, operating, legal, technical, social, which is ethical and psychological, et cetera. So the Markov blankets gives us a place to do the horse trading. And right, and so it's a synthesis of the elements in it. So that's where we're going to be starting the discussion. This is all beginning. There's nothing. You just heard everything that I know about it. So anyway, we'd love to have the discussion later on. And thank you, Daniel, for the clarifications, and thanks for the opportunity to share this and share the thinking together. Love it.
Thanks so much, Scott. Well, in service of multiple perspectives and unexpected interfaces, we've heard from Jen, an archaeologist and someone with so many thoughts and contributions in so many different areas. And Scott, you can leave this Jitsi, FYI. From Scott, our awesome thermo lawyer, crossover path that few knew existed. And now I would like to welcome our third participant, our third facilitator here, who's Alexandra Mikhailova. And Alexandra, or Sasha, is here to talk about neuroscience, improvisation, and so many other fun topics. So Sasha, where would you like to jump off? And Sean and Sarah, it'll be great to just have a conversation with all of us in this last little section with a facilitator.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, it's great to be on the other side. Usually I'm in the green room, kind of gearing up people to go on and share their screen properly. So yeah, it's very cool. Been listening to the live stream today and just thinking over some common themes, such as setting up the right constraints for successful teams, and that it's a really challenging thing to do on an individual level, but even more so on a team level, and how Complexity Weekend can be a part of that.
Cool. So what are you going to be doing in your session today, or what is something you'd like to bring to our participants today?
So jumping off of that idea, I want to do like a improvisational drawing to practice some constraints and some reflection, especially in the end of the year, and kind of like coming in and closing that thought. It's just important to reflect and to think about how we've changed as a community, as individuals. And so I'm going to be talking people through improvisational drawing through a few different prompts, and hopefully setting the right kind of constraints on their creativity as groups of people.
John or Sarah, anything to ask? Otherwise, I'm happy to ask something else as well.
No, I think it's just a really good point. Like having that constraint and learning how to kind of scope things with the team and even as an individual, especially when there's so many ideas, it can actually be hard to kind of hone in on, like, even we were talking earlier about like what is your purpose? It kind of sounds like a simple question, but kind of figuring that out can be difficult. And as we all interact with each other and form teams and come up with different ideas, that can change. So I'm excited for that interactive session. It sounds really fun and also helpful.
Something I had about purposes too is that they're iterative, right? Like you're not just going to sit down and come up with your team's purpose in one sitting. You're going to maybe come up with the first version. You're going to go try to build something based on that. You're going to interact with the market or a community of people you're trying to help. You're going to get feedback from that. And then you're going to be like, oh, you know what? Maybe actually we're misaligned a little bit. You might tweak the purpose. So that's always important to keep in mind with teams or many other complex systems, that it's often an iterative evolutionary process.
Yeah, and I think that the Heartbeat really accomplishes that very well, because it's not just about including different people's perspectives at the first meeting. It's about reflecting on how your perspective changes through time, and just allowing us that space to grow and change our mind. It's really important.
Yep. And as far as how we structure the Heartbeat, and we're always experimenting with it, we like to start with this centralization of attention, a regime of attention in the Fristenlandia. And by starting on a synchronizing note, we can begin to have some shared language, some shared experiences, like the live streams that we watched. And then as we move through the Heartbeat, it will get more and more decentralized. All of the following sessions are interactive, and there's going to be a lot of time just for the edges to form, for a lot of edge relationships, wandering around, mixing and matching. And then it ends, but it ends on a soft note, and we hope that you can return to the space and continue working. So, Sasha, I have a question about constraints in the area you are studying, which is developmental neuroscience. How would you say neuroscience development is similar or different to community development, and what could we learn about that mapping?
Yeah. So this is something I think about a lot with how it's taught, and the perspectives that we take on development. And I guess to get very specific into my field, I study early synapse formation. And for a long time, the perspective was that as a baby in early childhood, you overproduce synapses. So you kind of overshoot, and then you prune back as I guess technically after the age of 5, you start to lose synapses and you prune them back into more mature and developed circuits. And that's a really kind of appealing and simple way to think about it, because you kind of like dump in all the ingredients at the start, and then you refine. And of course, it's not that simple. And this is part of what my thesis work is around, is learning about and better understanding the regulation that happens at the start of the process. It's not just an overproduction at the start. It's actually a very tightly controlled process. And it, of course, can go awry with other, signaling pathways that interfere with what should be happening. And yeah, that's just a really good thing to keep in mind, that it's not just, especially with teamwork, it's not just like a dump of creativity or really good ideas and then you prune back. You're shaping it from the very first moment.
That resonates really strongly with me on a programming front. When I'm programming, it's the same, at least for me personally, where you have to put all the kind of ingredients down. You have to do all the kind of code diffs up front, and then you'll start to learn, oh, my original purpose of the code is kind of modified. I'm going to go change it. I'll start tweaking and things like that. But yeah, that resonated a lot, just in terms of that pruning process is probably very generic.
And also another domain would be like cooking. If you added all the heat up front, you're just going to burn it, and then it's going to be cold. Or if in a team, adding all the people up front and then pruning, maybe it's not always the way to go. And so you just described there's like this regulation, and maybe in the beginning there's more being added in, and then it starts drifting towards more being taken out to get to the distilled functional circuit. And that could be a lot like a team, a lot like ideation, whether it's the people or the ideas that are changing. So pretty fun stuff.
Yeah. I like the way that I think about it is gas and brake. And it's not that we go all gas and then all brake. And figuring out with our team formation and team meetings when to apply gas and brake appropriately, so that people feel that they have enough time to digest what's happening. Because, like Sarah mentioned, being a beginner is really special and happens only once. And so it's important to go through all those first steps and actually experience it.
Just to revisit what you were kind of saying about the initial creative act, going back to the programming kind of metaphor, I guess, is, you do want to do like a bunch of initial programming or whatnot, at least me personally, but also you have to be very careful, because if you name something a certain way in that first pass, you're going to change the way you think about it entirely for the rest of the programming task. So there might be an analogy there to kind of team formation, or how you initially frame things.
Yeah, I think that is so hard. I feel like it's this finding the balance between just doing, and then the planning, kind of really consciously thinking through every decision that you make. And I was actually talking to Dan, like one of the Heartbeat meetings we had, but that's something that I'm trying to do more, is doing more, because you can get really stuck in the planning and never do anything. So to your point, Sean, and I think we're all different with how we decide to do it, right? Like maybe you prefer to kind of code it all out. In the cooking analogy, maybe you want to measure everything out first, have it all there, and then start cooking, whereas some people kind of do it on the fly. Or you could just sit and read the recipe over and over and over again and never really do anything. So I think it's like finding that balance and then communicating that as a team and making sure everyone's on the same page is something that is difficult. And it's good to talk about it and kind of figure out how we can all do that together, because it's even hard as an individual, at least in my experience.
And to bring it back to some complexity keywords that people might be familiar with, like emergence, when small things are interacting and it leads to higher order properties. So you have the little synapses forming and unforming, and the neurons who are interfacing with each other. Yes, Scott, it is a Markov blanket. And then there's the top-down function of the system, which can then shape further development. So it's like this historical trajectory that doesn't simply return to a previous state, a tabula rasa. It's this historical development, and that's always keeping into account what has happened, and also is implicitly guided by a generative model, by a vision of what could be happening, or what is likely to happen, or what should happen. And so we have like the past and the present and the future that are all interacting, and then emergence, and the small making the large, and the large influencing the small, is a framework that in complexity science we use that also helps us make metaphors across systems and therefore integrate our experiences, which are very different on these panels and on these facilitator backgrounds. Sasha, in the last 2 minutes, what would you say a participant could look forward to, expect, learn, do in your session?
You could expect to practice some physical drawing while having conversations with other participants, and getting to see some things from a different perspective. And just to come full circle, I'd like to say that being part of this community has changed how I see things, and participating in the Complexity Weekends and the Heartbeats, it's really changed how I think about my own work. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that my activity later today is inspired by Monica's Jamboards, and taking it's so unbelievably simple, but asking people to take a few moments to reflect on what they just did is extremely powerful. And so it was heavily inspired by the Jamboard exercises, and it's just this circle of continued influences in the community. So just
thanks, Sasha.
Full circle.
Perfect note. And it's I think Jason Kidd said, we turned this team around 180 degrees, but now we are going to end up in a Jamboard. Maybe it was 360. I can't remember.
Segue.
Yeah. Monica Kang, a previous facilitator who is a Jamboard master and who really opened her eyes to some new ways of interactive events being carried out. And also Palma Strand, who in the last Heartbeat, we, with Palma, worked towards those one-on-one yoga mats. It ended up being another relational affordance of Gather. But for now, we are going to move to the Jamboard. So we posted the Jamboard link into the YouTube chat, and we'll post it again.
It's also linked in the program.
Yep, and I am going to, the participants, they will not see it. Sean and Sarah, you won't see it, but I'm going to have it on the live stream. So it can be seen on the live stream. Cool. So Jamboard is a way that we can all be interactively kind of contributing information to this shared visual workspace. Right now we're on the first slide, and this is just a welcome slide. So on the second slide, the questions are, who are you, why are you here, and what brings you to Complexity? So while the live stream's catching up and people are just opening this Jamboard, Sean or maybe Sarah first, what would you say to these questions? If you were writing a post-it note, what would you put on it? And you can just say that out right now while other people are adding post-its.
Cool. Yeah. Great questions. Very important questions to ask yourself and answer. My name is Sarah. I am generally interested in user experience design, and that is very broad, but that's kind of why I wanted to hop in and help you guys with the Heartbeat organizing and just see how you guys are doing it, because it's a complex system, you know. And switching to virtual, using Gather, using a new tool, figuring out how it all works is fun to me. So I am here to learn more about Complexity, more about Complexity Weekend, meet some new people, be inspired. I'm kind of always a beginner, I feel like, which is something that I used to be kind of not afraid of, but I think it's easy to feel insecure if you're a beginner, like I don't know anything, but I feel like this community has really helped me embrace that as something really valuable. You know, you're never going to be a beginner again. You're never going to be new to something again. And I was reflecting on this. I play guitar and I love playing guitar. But I remember when I first started, I was like, how the hell am I ever going to do this? And it can feel daunting, but it's also exciting. And knowing that you have a community of people who are all ready to learn with you and are at different levels and the same level as you is exciting. So long story short, I am here to learn, to be inspired, and yeah, I was brought here because I attended the last hackathon weekend, and it's been great since. So, yeah.
Cool. The only thing I'll add just really quickly is just and each Heartbeat, as more and more of you have come to repeated events, you familiarize with the tools. But in Jamboard, just in case people weren't sure, it's this button right here, Sticky Note. And if you click that Sticky Note button, it will make you a new Sticky Note, just in case anyone couldn't create one. And then there's other tools that can be utilized. So Sean, what would you say, even though you did also add a Post-it note down the bottom right? What would you say about that?
I actually wanted to kind of rip off something Sarah said. And I think one of the beauties about Complexity is that no one is ever going to be an expert in it. It basically would be like the sum total of all knowledge. I think if you were actually an expert in Complexity, because every system that basically has information processing, has, you know, micro level components that interact to create some sort of emergent whole. I mean, there are linear systems, there are non-complex systems, but they're probably the rarity in reality. And so that's the beauty of Complexity, is that we can all really embrace that beginner mode, because all it takes is one conversation. For me, perhaps like a somewhat expert in like data science, machine learning, like type of stuff I do for my day job, to talk to someone about law and be a complete beginner, because I've never read anything, you know, like, and so it's so easy to become a beginner in so many different different disciplines, but do have some form of shared language. That beginner's mindset is just like a markup blanket for it. Nice.
Yeah, perfect. Can't say it wasn't me who added that pen stroke. That's great for slide 2. Let's go to slide 3. And let's think about slide 3 as a fun doorway into the unknown. It's like we're just kicking off the Heartbeat. And also let's keep in mind that many people will be participating in the Heartbeat, and especially the broader community, who are asleep right now. So we want to be inclusive across time zone, which is why the live stream enables us to have a replayable version. So if it's 6 a.m. for someone and they're just sleeping, they'll wake up, they could catch up on the live stream if they wanted, and then they can join right in with the interactive sessions. So that helps us stretch out the window of curiosity opening and of inclusion. So same question to Sarah or Sean, maybe Sean first, just because last time was Sarah. What is something you're curious or wondering about, especially today?
I'm definitely like on board with learning more about free energy principle, like Markov blanket stuff. So I'm actually filling out a post right now where I'm calling it like the Markov blanket zoo. There's got to be some sort of blanket metaphor there. But like, I just want to see examples of Markov blankets in like every, you know, just a brainstorming session almost, of like, what does it look like in cooking, like we're doing, or programming, or, you know, that would be super fun for me.
And I really like this response by Fabian in the Jamboard. Find a way to communicate complexity without getting entangled in the complicatedness. And it's something that comes up so often because it's like, wait a minute, if we're finding the simple rules that lead to the complex patterns, or if we're finding the simple and understandable patterns that come from is it simplicity theory or is it complexity theory? And is it complexity science or is it elegance science? And that's not just where aesthetics and perspective enters in with this drive for simplicity, but then we can pull back out of our community inside of the complexity world. We have our own way of thinking about complexity. But then you step outside into the rainstorm and people will think complexity means complicated or intractable or insoluble. So how do we see complexity as a beginning point for connecting across and for working with these systems in a very nonlinear way, instead of seeing complexity as like the roadblock at the end of your investigation? Oh no, it was a complex system. But this is like the opposite. We're starting there as our field of preconditions, and then we're going to try to grow something that's really special. Sarah, what would you say is something you're curious or wondering about today?
Yeah, I put a little sticky, but how to apply complexity thinking in my life. So I was thinking about this when Jen was talking, one of the facilitators, and just about, to me, it's difficult because we're kind of changing our mental model about how things work. And I feel like we have a tendency to, like she was saying, really strictly have boundaries around, different systems. So the economy and then this, COVID situation, and it's kind of either or, but the reality is like, everything is so intertwined, right? And like AI affecting unemployment, and it's all one big system. And I think learning how to think with that complexity mindset and what that means is kind of the hardest thing. And that's why I think it does take time to it's like slowly seeping into my brain, like, okay, how do I think about things in this new way? And what does that afford me in my life, when I do anything, or if I'm thinking about a problem. So yeah, how to kind of more practically apply that and just better understand it is something I have been thinking a lot about.
Cool. Let's do a brief little stay over in slide 4, which is
Cool.
What is a cool complexity concept, and how would you like it to be taught? How would you like to teach it, if it's something that you do or would like to teach, even if in the future, or if it's something you want to learn by doing or learn by example? How could it be learned? And maybe it's a cool concept and you don't know what the best way to learn is, and so you want to frame it as a question about how could we learn about a certain concept. Sean, what's a cool concept today that you want to teach or learn? Be on either side of the table of.
I think it would be maybe like what I put in the last, like Kamalgrove complexity, or like thinking about complexity from the perspective of like the shortest program to generate some sort of observed behavior. Maybe I'll put that on the left, even though I'm definitely, as I said, not an expert and nobody is. Maybe we should change that text.
It's funny. Well, it's funny. The Kolmogorov information criterion, or measure, which is about that shortest possible program that generates an outcome. So the digits of pi are, quote, random. So from a Shannon entropy perspective, it's like every digit is surprising you. But then the program that generates pi might be only a couple lines of code. And so in that algorithmic way of thinking, pi is actually something simple because it has a low information content. The program that generates is short. And Sean, it's too real. It makes me think about, what is the shortest possible lead up that we could generate a program with? In this case, it's an event program, but it's something that we're always talking about, is like, how can we make it simple? We're complexity organizers, and we welcome everyone else to come help co-organize. And so in the onboarding and accessibility side, how will we make it as simple as possible? Because if it's not as simple as possible, it's going to be overwhelming. There's just too much happening right now in the digital world. We need to make it simple. What do you think about that?
That's when you get into like values and stuff like that, where like if we can really clearly communicate in 1 hour long or 30-minute live stream, like what are our values, what are our guidelines, how do we embody these values when we act as agents in the gather space or in our community? Like that's kind of a simple program that leads to all sorts of crazy emergent behavior and team formation and whatnot, if we get that right? If we get that leverage point right. Harkening back to Danilo Meadows, maybe I'll add a post-it for that also. Leverage points are awesome.
Cool. Let's go to the next slide, 5. I like the triangle. Yeah, I want to learn about triangles, please. Number 5, and speaking of those sort of simple rules for complex systems, the question is, what kinds of participant, and remember that everyone's a participant, behaviors and norms can help us make Complexity Weekend an amazing space. So it's a kind of binary, what would be the simple rules that you'd whisper into the simulated agent? You'd say, psst, yes, and, always remember that you should be building on what the next robot is going to be saying, or remember that you want to be building constructively instead of negating or disregarding, and all these kinds of things that we might want to see. And then also just whether people are aware of them or not, what might be some things that you wouldn't tell that robot to do, or you would specifically tell it not to do. Jargon, that's a definite one, and it's such a gray zone. It's hard to say what's jargon and what's not. For example, certainly for some people, it's their first time hearing of a Markov blanket. Other people who are on the other side of the blanket, they're already familiar with the nitty-gritty and with the critiques and with the variants. And so how are we going to be on all sides of the issues, not just from beginner to expert, but there's so many different kinds of beginners, there's infinite, and then there's so many kinds of experts. So really it's just everyone's perspective and understanding of these issues. And that's why the connecting across is so important, because if we were going to have a Markov blanket discussion and we said it's a beginner's hour, everyone else can just leave. Or if we said it's an in-group discussion, everybody else can just leave, it's not an inclusive conversation, and it's not actually the most productive or effective either. How are we going to have a cross-cutting discussion that includes people through the usage of these simple rules that we can always just return to and remind people of? What's something that comes to mind there, either of you two?
Yeah, pretty much all of that. I think just being open. So things we want to avoid jargon. I think it is hard. So sometimes what is jargon, what is not, is different to anybody. So I think things we do want to see is that if you don't understand something, just ask. If there's a certain term being used, you're like, wait, can you explain that? That is always so helpful for both people, the person who maybe brought up the term and then the person who's not sure about it. Like reinforcing that knowledge and being able to explain things you're talking about is only going to help you. So I think if we can just all be open to that, right? Like beginners, experts, beginners in all different fields. The more we can just be open, and it's hard to admit like, oh, I don't know what you're talking about. But know that everybody here, no one's an expert in everything. To Sean's point, you can't be an expert in complexity in everything. So just keeping that beginner mindset in mind.
Yeah, and just to tie a couple of these, unexplained abstraction is a form of cognitive violence. Wow. And to tie these, a couple on this side together about things we want to avoid, the behavior that makes people uncomfortable, too much chaos. Let's just really keep in mind that everyone's coming from a very different place in their morning, in their afternoon, culturally. Just let's start with that pause and let's try to communicate well, but let's also recognize that we can be, direct, or what's direct for one person isn't for another. Let's start with the relational insight and just try to be chill with each other, and also refer back to these Jamboards just to understand what other people are into. So we'll keep it positive, and we're there to support each other, and just anyone can speak to the organizers if they want to, not even in a bad or like a reporting way, just how can we shape this in a way that leads to the best possible outcomes. All right, let's go to slide 6. Awesome there though. We'll go to slide 6, and that will be our last question slide. So on slide 6, it's community support. And this slide is about what you can give as well as what you're looking for. So we sometimes think about the community as like a distributed marketplace for wicked problems or for skill sets that are needed or on offer. So if this is for you posting as an individual, or it could be you posting for your team. So in my team, we're looking for X skill set or role, or I'm the kind of person who's looking for this kind of a role. It could be various other things you like to teach, things you'd like to learn, a language, computer language, natural language, complexity language. Do you have something that you're preparing for? You're going to be communicating complexity to stakeholders in 2 weeks and you need Jen's help. These things could all happen in the community. So what would be something fun on either side? Either of you two first.
I'll get into maybe adding a post in a second. I think I just want to talk broadly for a second about what it means to kind of be a community practice, or what we're trying to form as far as a community practice. And we are really trying to create like a very supportive environment for individuals, for teams, for everyone's individual kind of career arc or a team's goal. Like openness is really key. Like if you can really share like, hey, we're a team that maybe started last hackathon or a brand new team no one knows about yet. We really need someone to work on database, backend development. Just be open and honest about what your deficiencies are as a team, so that we can create this space together where we can come together and help fill the gaps with our very diverse background of all these different participants. So I think the openness and willingness to be vulnerable and share what you need is really key. And then that kindness and generosity of knowing when you have a surplus and you want to actually divert it into this community. Those two definitely need to come together to kind of make this marketplace of just good intention and awesome outcomes.
I'm so glad that there's supply side passive aggressive comments. I mean, always in demand, right? Okay, too bad. No, I'm just kidding. Thanks to everyone who's filling this out, and you can put your contact information and the Heartbeat events. Just to add one more kind of note on process, the Heartbeat events, the only platform that we use is Gather. That's the spatial chat, and so all the interactive sessions are in Gather. And then there's the YouTube live stream, which is for archiving. It helps us have the tip of the iceberg visible for all of our participants and all interested parties from different time zones. So that's the Heartbeat. And then when we do the weekend hackathon, we have a text and file sharing backend, and that helps have a stability of identity. And so you see some people who are using this norm of including like @ and then their username. This is a Keybase username in this case. But that's really where we start to make that connection across the needs and the asks and help build teams, make connections, all this sort of fun stuff. But for now, just including your name, and people will hopefully get to know each other today. But this is going to be really awesome. I just looking forward to today. Great facilitators. It was so awesome working with you, Sarah. You brought a lot of clarity and insights to our process, so it's just deeply appreciated.
Thank you guys. It's been awesome, and I'm glad I could be a part of it.
Yay.
Yeah.
So we are going to stay on time. It is almost 10:20 a.m. PST. So I'll just flip in the live stream to a last set of tips that came from Monica Kang in one of her previous visit. She's just an innovative facilitator, to say the least. And these are just some general tips for online collaboration, the kind of simple rules for complex teams that could turn a group of people with latent skills and connections and project ideas. It can turn it from just another conversation or not at an online event into a long-term team. So just remember that not every single edge has that possibility, but we want to support a network where those kinds of things do happen. So use active listening, especially if you're a talker. Listen is especially important. Being curious and open, assuming kindness, and also giving that second pause for lag and for intercultural communication. Playing to our strengths, over communicating, remembering that there's just so many differences and preferences. And with that in mind, I'm going to flip back to the program. This is going to end the live stream at exactly 10:20. Last section of the live stream was our awesome interactive Jamboard session. And now we would like to welcome all of our participants to Gather. So you can click on this URL and we'll meet you in the main room where we will be having a poster session. So we have 3 teams presenting posters. We'll have half an hour where you can just walk around, talk to the poster presenters or talk to each other just like a poster session IRL. And then at 10:50 a.m. PST, we're going to have 2 lightning talks, and we're really looking forward to that. And we asked all the participants before the weekend if they wanted to give a poster or a talk. So thanks just so much to everyone from the community who stepped up to do that. And we hope to see you January 30th, 2021 for our next Heartbeat. We will give more information about that later, but complexityweekend.com is always a place to go. So Sean, Sarah, thank you so much for your work and service. It was really awesome.
See you in
Thanks
Gather.
so much.
Bye.